The Titans were sons of the god of the sky and the goddess of the earth. According to the Greeks, it was Prometheus of Titan lineage who created man from a piece of clay. After life, the most important gift from Prometheus to the Greeks was fire, and with fire, the arts. The body beautiful, art and thought in ancient Greece. At the beginning of the 19th century, Lord Elgin had acquired a large proportion of the sculptures from the Parthenon in Athens and had brought them to the United Kingdom. Lord Elgin was not an archaeologist, he was Britain's ambassador to the Turkish Empire, which occupied Greece at that time. Founded in 1753, the British Museum houses some of the most important collections of Greek art and architecture in the world. These include sculptures from the Temple of Apollo at Versailles, the sculpted tombs of ancient Lythia, and the Mausoleum of Halicarnassos, the fifth wonder of the ancient world. Today, some of the most outstanding works of these collections have left the halls of the British Museum to be part of travelling expositions. The collection, exhibited under the name The Body Beautiful, Art and Thought in Ancient Greece, began its tour in March. This dynamic Spanish institution was declared Best European Museum in 2004. Together with the British Museum, Mark has played an active part in the creation of this exposition. From here, we will travel to the world of the ancient Greeks. From Spain in the west to India in the east, and from North Africa to the Balkans and the banks of the Black Sea, the Greeks brought their influence. In antiquity, Greece was not a unified country as it is now. Its territory was made up of a multitude of small city-states. These were frequently built at the foot of fortified elevations called acropolises, like the one in Athens, where we are now. Even though they were allied in confederations, the local rivalry was ferocious. From the confrontations between Achilles and Agamemnon during the Trojan War, the Greeks had always fought between themselves.
This is what interests me. First and foremost, that some good may come of it, and that we may put an end to our mutual rivalries and unite in a war against the barbarians. And if this is impossible, that I may show who they are that stand in the way of the happiness of the Greeks, and that all may be made to see that even as in times past, Athens justly held the sovereignty of the sea, so now she not unjustly lays claim to the leadership.
Art was never the source of Greek identity. It was a symptom rather than a cause. The Greek-speaking peoples identified themselves first and foremost by their language, by their common gods, and by their sense of society, which was the city. Above all, though, it was Greek that made you Greek. The peoples of antiquity who were not Greek-speaking were hoi barbaroi, the barbarians. The word in Greek was an onomatopoeia, a word which simulated the babble of ununderstood voices.
Art was one of the shared cultural experiences that united the Greeks as one people, the Hellenes. The cultured Greek was not ashamed of nudity. For the first time in history, the representation of the human body in all its splendor became the centerpiece of art. The Greeks looked to the beauty of man, a beauty which is treated realistically. Every individual has a personality which is transmitted throughout his body. The sculptor works to capture and freeze in his work the expression of his subject. Such is the case with this pensive philosopher. Life is movement. The Greeks introduced so-called contrapposto, whereby the weight of a figure rests on one leg only. With this, flexibility and agility is given to this goddess. The search for beauty, expression, and movement defines Greek art throughout its different phases. In the archaic period of Greek art, the most ancient, a common type of naked male sculpture in marble was the kouros, a word that we can translate as youth. Carved with almond-shaped eyes and a seemingly enigmatic smile, the formal composition is influenced by Egyptian statuary. The kore, or girl, was the female counterpart to the kouros. In ancient Greece, girls and women lived relatively secluded from public life and were usually represented clothed.
Women continued to be shown dressed as a sign of their seclusion, but sculptors became increasingly skilled at suggesting the female form beneath sheer drapery.
As with these stones, both kouros and kore were used frequently as funerary stones. The winged god of death was called Thanatos. His brother, Hypnos, symbolized sleep. Together, they are often shown laying a fallen warrior to rest. When a Greek died, a coin was placed in the mouth. This was the fare demanded by Charon, the ferryman, who ferried the departing soul across the river Styx, which separated the land of the living from that of the dead. For Freud, the creator of psychoanalysis, man is driven by death, Thanatos, and by sex, Eros. In Greek mythology, Eros, whom we see represented here, was the god of love. From his name, we derive the word eroticism. Kairipos is beautiful, is the inscription on this bottle for perfumed oil. The ceramics with red and black figures offer a pale reflection of what Greek painting must have been like then, now faded away. The sexually explicit images were common in the art of the period. Craters, like this one, were used to mix wine with water. For the Greeks, symposia, or drinking parties, had a social importance which surpassed mere eating and drinking.
It is necessary, if you want to follow the right path, to begin when you are young to seek out beautiful bodies, and if your guide directs you properly, to love at first only one body and engender beautiful converse therein. Next, to understand that the beauty that resides in this or that body is related to that which resides in any other, and that if you are to seek beauty of outward form, you must become a lover of all beautiful bodies.
To the question, did the Greek man in the 5th century BC step out of his house naked into the street and walk into the marketplace? The answer has to be no, but in certain circumstances, nudity was the norm. For example, the gymnasium. The word in Greek, gymnos, means stripped for exercise. And there was also the Greek drinking party, and if Greek vases are to be believed, there were frequent occasions when men came together for the symposium in a house, a private house, with a room set aside for wine, song, and sex.
The existence of man passes between conception and death. The life of the ancient Greeks was marked by the search for arete, or excellence.
Arete is a word that doesn't translate very well into English. We usually say excellence. It was a moral aesthetic, a standard for which the upbringing of boys and youths aimed as a goal. It could be achieved first and foremost by being born into the right family, second by cultivating the body through athletics, and ultimately being a victor in athletic competition. It depended on one's ability to speak well in public assembly, to enter into a philosophical education. Ultimately, though, it was won by putting on arms and fighting in defense of one's city, and, if necessary, being prepared to die the kalos thanatos, the beautiful death.
Closing ranks, making a wall of shields, the Greeks formed a phalange and advanced, pushing towards the enemy. To fall in defense of your own city, if it was necessary, was the greatest sacrifice on the road to excellence. The death of Prince Hector at the hands of Achilles at the gates of Troy was depicted as an example for the soldiers to emulate. To achieve excellence was part of a young Greek's education. Physical laziness was as bad as ignorance. The sculptor, Polykleto, introduced a system of proportions based on the relationship between the body and its parts. The finger was the unit measure 1, and the total size of a human figure was 7 times the height of the head. Myron's The Discus Thrower is an emblematic sculpture of the classical period. The figure freezes the action of a young athlete at the moment of throwing a discus. His muscles appear rigid, like the arc that forms part of its composition. This treatment of movement breaks with the artistic conventions of the earlier period.
The body of a vigorous man cannot be corpulent, nor white like that of a woman, pale through her confinement to her home. Think of our young bronzed men. They are as they should be. Men full of life, energy, virility, and brimming with health. They are not wrinkled nor skinny, nor above all flabby. They achieve this with a healthy diet and exercise. These two elements are to the human body like a sieve to wheat.
The Olympic Games were the most famous in antiquity. Every 4 years in summer, they took place here in the sanctuary of Olympia, where we find ourselves now. During the Games, a sacred truce halted the war. All Greek-speaking athletes could compete. They erected statues for the victors. The winners were crowned with olive branches and won fame and honor for their cities. The aged Diagoras, a former Olympic champion, died of happiness when he saw his 2 sons victorious in the Games. The athletes represented the living image of mythological heroes. The athletes could be touched. The heroes, in turn, were often descendants of the union between a god and a mortal. Hercules, the most famous Greek hero, was the son of the biggest of the gods and a woman, Alcmene. Amongst many other exploits, it was Hercules who took the golden apples from the tree of the Hesperides and killed the ferocious lion of Nemea. He also fought alongside other Greek heroes such as Theseus against the Amazons. It was upon his return from his expedition with the Argonauts, whom he helped to find the Golden Fleece, that, it is believed, Hercules founded the Olympic Games. Great sculptors, such as Phidias, had their workshops in Olympia. Amongst other artistic themes, they could sculpt the heroes, the famous athletes, and the gods.
The gods in ancient Greece were omnipresent, and everything that you did in the name of religion. So athletics was no exception, and the Olympic Games was a major event in the religious calendar of all the Greeks. It was held at the height of summer for 5 days in August, around the time of a full moon. And there were not only events for athletic competition, but also events that centered on the Altis, the sanctuary of Zeus, and his great temple. The culmination of the festival was a sacrifice of cattle when the meat was butchered and roasted and shared out between all the attendants of the festival.
The Titan, Prometheus, was punished by the gods for giving fire to mankind and showing them art. The gods worshipped by the Greeks resembled human beings, both physically and emotionally. Some of the most important are Zeus, god of lightning and father of the gods. He frequently governed capriciously. Hera, sister and wife of Zeus, goddess of marriage and protector of married women. She behaved like a jealous wife. Aphrodite, goddess of beauty and love. She bestowed upon Prince Paris the love of the wife of the king of Sparta, so causing the Trojan War. Apollo, god of the sun and prophecy, conqueror of the monstrous serpent Python. His most famous oracle was found in Delphi. The representation of mythological entities breaks with the realistic treatment of the human figure. The Sphinx was a winged lion with a woman's head that devoured anyone who couldn't solve her riddles. Oedipus, the hero, destroyed her. Amongst these fantastic characters, we find sea creatures with a human torso, like that of Triton. Men with bull's heads, like Minotaur. Women with snakes for hair. Horses with a human torso.
From time to time, there were those, philosophers mostly, who questioned the truth about the stories that were told about the gods. Socrates in 399 BC was cruelly put to death for the impiety with which it was said he was corrupting the youth of Athens. But to ask, did the Greeks believe in their gods, is to ask the wrong question. Greek religion was not about belief, it was about ritual, it wasn't about doctrine, it was about doing things, sacrifice, prayer, and the offering of votive objects were all means for communicating with the gods and influencing those who presided over the fragility of the human condition.
Hellenistic art broke with the traditions of the earlier classical period. It is the era of Alexander the Great. The Greeks conquer Asia, and emotion overcomes reason. The cold equilibrium in art comes to an end. The realism of the classical period changed to naturalism, which wasn't afraid of dealing with everyday themes, like this fisherman selling his catch. Neither did portraits fail to depict Socrates' ugliness. The emotion and personality which a picture transmits takes priority over equilibrium and perfection. The Hellenistic period can be characterized by its giving free rein to states of mind and its expression. From today's point of view, this was a great advance. Unfortunately for the ancient Greeks, it was going to be its final stage. Alexander the Great unified Greece, but condemned its culture to a secondary role from within an empire which spanned 2 continents. In the history of art, Greek creativity had fulfilled its function. Its influence, however, would last to the present day.